So today I want to talk to you about the gap that exists in early childhood education for your children who have food allergies and educators. So basically, childcare education is, some of it's private, some of it's public, some of it's just, big chains, and it's all very different. So it's not like private schools, public schools. In a public school where everything is like standardized. In a childcare, it is usually mandatory that they have their first aid training every 3 years. And this is called the First Aid in an Education and Care Setting, which is, the code is HLTAID 012. So you might want to look up like the things that your childcare educators learn. And then there's the mandatory CPR training, which is part of that course, but you can also do it on its own, and that should be updated every year. So the first aid is 3 yearly and the CPR is yearly. And in that first aid, and I know this because my business delivers this course, and it is mandatory, and it's mandatory for, the first aid in some form is mandatory for most places, offices, childcare, schools, etc. But the allergy part of things is minimal, because you can, with anything first aid, you can only fit so much in. So each subject has its own little portion of time, and you'll learn in a first aid course the signs and symptoms of anaphylaxis in general, and how to use an EpiPen or other auto-injectors. Soon it will be about the Neffy as well, if not already. So I have developed a problem with this, even though we deliver the first aid, because allergy is like a whole world of stuff. Like, from diagnosis, your journey has started before diagnosis. Obviously, your journey has started with the second that your child has had a reaction to something. I know we've heard in the news this week of a fatality in Adelaide in a 9-year-old girl where things just went really quickly. And it's important to point out that this is not the norm. That is not the most common scenario. This is a really sad story, but it's not the most common scenario. But allergy is a life-threatening condition, and your child is not allergic to one thing and anaphylactic to the other. Every single person that has a diagnosed food allergy has the ability to have anaphylaxis to that food at any point. Just because they haven't yet had anaphylaxis to that food doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It may never happen, but what I'm saying is you're not allergic to one thing and anaphylactic to another. Okay, you're allergic, which means that allergic reaction could escalate to anaphylaxis at any time, even though it hasn't initially. So my problem is the gap in training, especially in childcare, where your child spends maybe a significant amount of time. Even 1 day a week could be an 8-hour day. That's a significant portion of time in their life. And we cater for all sorts of other needs, but we don't cater for the nuances of food allergy life. We don't cater for, the communication with parents, the fear that both parents and educators have about what should happen. Like, I've took loads of notes here, but I've got so many bits here of educators that have spoken to me this week about issues and the frightening nature of having a child with allergies, about not being able to clean things properly, about just being really underprepared, about someone bringing in egg boxes to do some artwork and then there being some egg yolk in it and them not knowing what to do. It just is. And I know you can't teach everyone everything, but there's literally no training in this area. So what there is obviously I've done some research in what there is, and there are free trainings that talk about emergency response, EpiPen, some online training courses that give, again, just the emergency response. There are other trainings that talk about food allergy management. So you're talking about managing that actual food. You're not talking about the child and the family. You're not talking about the holistic side of things. Safe food service. So, different colour bowls, laminating placemats, etc., things like that. Again, not about how does this child, maybe asking how does this child normally, what's their normal pattern of reaction, or when were they last seen? Have they had yearly follow-up? Do they, do you have specific anxieties? Are there things that we can do? Just things that make the educator's life easier. Just all those nuances, they're just absolutely not serviced. Again, practical kitchen management. So that's all about the actual food and the way it's served. And policy and procedure framework, which again is about the wider net. And so, I just don't think it's enough. I think that there should be a clear training in these childcares to deal with everything else that's allergy focused, because I think the main thing is, I can almost guarantee that the childcare educators will feel better and more confident about dealing with allergy children when they actually have the facts, the stats and more knowledge. And as a result, the parents, when they're dropping that child off or they're visiting that daycare to potentially go to, they can say, oh yeah, we've done this online course with an allergy nurse specialist, and we feel confident with allergies, and and we can see where you're coming from, and we understand that it feels like X, Y, and Z, and I just feel like this is such a massive gap. And it's not like dealing with someone in the street who has had a heart attack and you learn how to have an emergency response like CPR. There is ways that you can avoid having to give that emergency response in a childcare. So, like, avoidance is always better than cure. I'm not talking about just avoiding that food, but avoiding the situation that ends up in an emergency scenario in the first place, because often it's either a mistake has been made or children have shared food. Like, that must be so hard in a daycare to monitor that children getting up, walking around with specific foods, because at the end of the day, a child can be allergic to anything. You can't ban all foods in a childcare. And when people bring lunch boxes into a childcare, then that's a whole other situation, because if a family doesn't live with allergies, then we know that it's just not on their radar. So I think covering the really important things that the childcare educators need in a short online course, that's kind of where I'm going. But the fact that in their basic first aid courses, they're only shown how to use an EpiPen and the symptoms of an allergic reaction, which are, let's face it, mostly adult focused, then this, to me, I feel like is a problem. So I'd be really interested to know if you've had issues in childcare, or if you have really good news stories about your childcare. And like I said, this is not the fault of a daycare, the educators, or the parents, or anything. It's a gap that hasn't been made mandatory. And I think it should be made mandatory. And that's what I'm building right now, is the course that should be in the childcares. But, so some of the things that I would like to include, and what I think that childcare workers or educators should be up to date with, is if a child mentions feeling unwell after eating, is it a reaction? Is it just tummy ache? How do we know how they look in a young child? You're planning an excursion or a special event with food, what specific questions ensure it's actually safe for allergic children? Food's being shared at the lunch table, how do you manage this when allergies are present? A child complains of not feeling right after snack time, when to observe, when to act immediately, what to, do you know how long to observe a child for if they potentially had their allergy food? A new family member enrolls and discloses that the child has a severe allergy, so what steps come next? Birthday treats, morning tea, celebrations. How do you make these inclusive? What conversations do you have with parents? I just think there's a big gap there between childcare and the mandatory training that they have to have. So I would be very interested to hear your views, what you think should be involved in a training in this kind of gap. I would be very interested to know your stories, if you have any thoughts, feelings around daycare with your allergic child, or if you are a childcare worker and you feel that this is relevant to you, then let us know your experience. So thank you very much for listening to me today. If you are a parent with food allergy or a child with food allergy, then you can download our free infographic, which is an allergy reaction cheat sheet, but it has actual pictures of allergic reactions so you can maybe see and decipher what's going on with your child. And we also have the Nest Allergy membership, which is a monthly supportive membership for food allergy parents to come in and just be with us, ask me questions 6 days a week. There's a whole online portal with optional videos you can watch, which should be helpful for most allergy parents, and just a sense of community there with all the other parents living with food allergy. So until then, we will see you next time. Bye bye.